Hi, trail friends. Welcome to the Trail Network podcast. I'm your co-host, Katie Asmuth, joined by Hilary Yang as we interview in person with Rod Farvard and Tim Tollefson, who paced Rod at Western States. Rod had a magical day at Western States, as I'm sure you've heard, running toe-to-toe with the legend Jim Walmsley for a second place finish, making him the third fastest person to run Western States in 51 years with a finish time of 14:24 and 15 seconds. And as you probably know too, those seconds really mattered at the end. He speaks of his self-belief, running in the moment, shooting your shot. We know you're going to love this one. Enjoy. Hello, everybody. I'm your co-host, Katie Asmuth, and I'm joined by
Hilary Yang.
And we are here to welcome a hero's welcome to Rod Farvard in person.
Yeah.
At the great Tim Tollefson's house. And we have Tim here too today. We are so happy to have you. I'm going to start off with reading a post that Rod posted today. He says, "This race," speaking of Western States, "took a hold on me 3.5 years ago when I first moved off the wait list, and it hasn't let go. It's led most conversations, most decisions, and most sacrifices since then, all in the pursuit of that special day there." And so when I read that, there's a personal, deep, visceral feeling that comes from it, because for myself, I'll just speak for myself, there is an omnipresent Western States vibe feeling all the time. And you did it. A dream realized. How you feeling?
I don't know if it's fully realized yet, though. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling very proud of myself, and I feel like I had a special day there, but has it been the special day yet? I don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you feel like you've begun to process it, or do you feel like you're still living in this kind of surreal state of just everyone's kind of like the excitement and like, oh, everyone wants your attention, they want your time, and you're still kind of figuring out how you feel about it? Or do you feel like are you just kind of sitting with those feelings right now?
Yeah, I don't think I've fully processed it yet. It's just kind of internalizing what everyone else is telling me that just happened right now, and trying to, respond respectfully and thank them, but I haven't had some time to really think fully on the day besides like the more surface level aspects of it. But I usually don't. It usually takes me a while to really realize it, and I need a good setting to do that. And typically that's out on the trails by myself to really like stop and process things with anything in my life. So hoping my legs work pretty soon and I can get some alone time out on the trails. But yeah, it's still been just a blur, and I feel like I haven't let it sink in yet.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't think you're quite running yet again. You would be superhuman if you were like already out on the trails again, like 4 days later.
He's on his bike.
That's true.
Pete saw him today. He's like, Rod's already out there. Yeah.
And hopefully you get on the trail soon, because your fans want a blog post, and you don't want to keep them waiting for too long.
I know. Shout out Finn. Don't worry, there's one coming.
Oh, man. Tim, how are you feeling about, I know Rod's day hasn't fully sunk in, but you've been a big part of the training and just the journey, I guess, with Rod. And so how are you feeling kind of stepping back and looking at Rod's race and your perspective on it?
It's the closest I'll probably be to being a proud parent. I'm just like, yeah, he spread his wings and he took that shot. But I feel pretty good. I only ran 18 miles. So, it's pacing is a lot easier than being in the thick of it. But it was a really fun experience just to be, as a fan of the sport, to actually like be in the game while the game was happening. Like a fly on the wall was just pretty special.
Yeah. And I mean, you paced 18 miles, but you guys trained together so much in the lead up to the race too, right? So that must have felt like an even more invested interest in, Rod's day. And like, you guys really ran a lot of miles together and probably visualizing what the race was going to look like, how it might play out, all the stuff, right?
Yeah, there was a fair amount of that, which we had some pretty good long runs, didn't we?
Yeah,
It
definitely.
had some ups and had some downs, but it was kind of neat to see, like, even witness him troubleshoot some of those problems that happen on long runs, and then implement that race day. I think it's not a surprise that it came together because he's a student of the sport, and I think, Rod, you've said like something about like, I'm not going to make the same mistake twice, which is something I wish I could learn because I make the same mistake over and over and over and over. But I think that speaks to just the way he approaches the sport and, this craft. It's, hey, if I mess up or if something did go well, I'm going to take inventory of that, really deeply meditate on it, and then make a change next time so that it doesn't happen again.
I will say too, in our runnings together leading up to the race, it definitely was like a bit of, I guess it felt like a precursor to what could happen if Tim did pace me. And it did feel like we were keying off that. Like, I distinctly remember kind of Tim even just running like right behind me in training runs instead of right in front of me. And on the day that felt like we were just out on a training run. I will say too, though, that in my visualizations, I never really thought that we'd be leading the race together. Instead, like, I envisioned picking up Tim and we're going hunting, and him trying to push me in that way. But Tim is one of the most experienced people in the sport, and he's led races in very competitive fields. He's raced Jim. He knew what to tell me in the moment. He knew the cues he was getting from Jim too. So I felt like really lucky to have someone that was experienced and has been in that situation before, rather than someone who might have maybe gone crazy because we took the lead and just hyped me up too much and, spiraled everything. So,
well, I think we want to get into the race.
Yeah.
Like, we need to get deep, but I think it's really interesting because, at least from the outside perspective, it really looked like you were able to let your pacers like actually cue into Jim, and that you were just running your own race. Mm-hmm. Like, you were dialed. You weren't looking at anybody. You weren't getting hyped when everybody was cheering. You were just doing Rod and didn't see anybody. And so I'm curious if was sort of the plan, if you were just able to lean on them, or if you were out there competing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I gotta say, like, nothing went to plan on the day. Like, I didn't ever plan to, well, no, things went to plan, but I mean, like, the way the race turned out, like, I didn't ever think I'd be leading the day. So, it was all very brand new territory that I didn't even really visualize. But the one thing I really just kept coming back to is just to do what felt sustainable in that very moment and not have to think about, how I'd feel in 2 miles and 20 miles and 100 miles. Like, I just wanted to race all day. And it really started from like the first step of the day. And I didn't get ahead of myself when we took the lead from Jim. It didn't mean anything really. Like, I still just needed to feel like I was doing what I needed to do in that moment. And my pacers, I think, understood that element for me. Just to your point, like, I was very quiet and focused and not waving at people and stuff like that. And I think those cues from me, my pacers could tell that they just need to keep me focused and do what I needed to do in the moment.
It was interesting because I saw you quite a bit during the race, especially the beginning, just like following for the media, and like up at the escarpment, we're all standing there being like, who's going to be first over the top of the escarpment, and kind of like placing our side bets on it. And there was just like this collective ripple when it was like, oh my God, it's Rod Farvard just coming right over the top of the escarpment. But I have to say what struck me, because I've been up there in previous years and seen people come out like super hot, and then you don't hear from them later in the race. Mm-hmm. But it didn't strike me like you were running outside of your abilities or your comfort then. And I remember just thinking that, like, you went by and I was like, Rod looks just like really comfortable. This is the pace that feels good for him, not him being like, I'm going to be first over the top to like make a statement. And I just felt like that kind of carried through. Like every time I saw you, Robinson Flat, like you were just, no matter where you were in that lead pack, because you guys were yo-yoing and it was chaos and it was like, it just looked like you were very much running your own race. And there was a lot of guys that were like chasing. And I feel like you expend a lot of energy doing that, you know? So you felt like you were able to block that out because there was a ton of attention. There was like so much crazy energy, especially like early before you had pacers where it was just like you, right? You had to really lock in.
Yeah. I think that's a great way to put it. And I haven't dove into the splits whatsoever. I'm excited to do that this weekend. But I think we were like 42 minutes to the top of the escarpment. I don't know how that compares. If there's some people who know, let us know. But
where's Liam? Aid Station Fireball.
Tim says it's about right.
Yeah, about right.
Okay. So it didn't feel like anything. How the escarpment played out, and it was, I think, how everyone expected it to. Like Jim went to the front, and everyone had to be 10 to 15 steps behind him. But it got to a point where, we were just shuffling, and everyone was running the same pace. It's just like who is at the front versus who is a couple people back. So I just kind of went next to Jim and was running up it with him, and it gets eventually to the single track, and he stepped aside to let me take it on the single track, and I just didn't really think anything about it. Again, everyone's running the same pace. It's just like who is in front doesn't really matter. But then I started to think about like the advantage of being up there in the front, especially dropping into the high country, and I get to set the pace in the high country now. People don't typically pass on that single track, and I don't want to like clip heels or like worry about tripping. So like, why not go to the front? And it was extremely comfortable. So I'm happy with my decision to do that. I didn't think I would do that. To your point, I thought I was going to get shit for doing that and being the first person up the escarpment, but
isn't it a curse? I mean, it's kind of a no curse. Whoever's first in the escarpment's like, oh, you're going to have a rough day. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Curse broken.
Yeah, totally.
In my head, I was like, this better stick, but
I have made a statement.
But yeah, that was the theme, really. Like I was just running my race. I didn't feel like I was attacking at any point or chasing at any point. Like, especially going into the canyons, you can't really see where people are. I wasn't getting splits where people are, and I just wanted to run what felt sustainable. I was getting rolled by some people too, like in the back of the top 10, and I dropped back a few places, but didn't panic about it. And like before we knew it, we were all at the Devil's Thumb climb, and there was like 5 to 7 of us just all packed there. So it was it was, I guess, to sum it up, like I feel like we're all at very similar fitness levels coming into that race, and we were all just running what we thought was a sustainable pace. And the gap between people, especially through the canyons and there, really displayed that. Yeah.
What's fascinating about that is that I remember at training camp, we were running with Hayden and on some of those days, and there was one point that Hayden and I broke away, and I was chatting with him, and we had talked about how having Jim back in the race changes the dynamic, because typically everyone, like you said, matches Jim. They look to Jim, they stay 10 to 15 meters behind, and Jim controls the entire race because they yield to the king. And like I had mentioned to Hayden that, hey, you need to run your own race. Like you don't defer to what Jim's doing, because Hayden has admitted that a few of his times that he blew up, he was matching Jim instead of running what he wanted. And was there ever a time when, like you said, you were running your race? Do you think that, could you pick up that Jim was, kind of surprised there were people taking the lead that early from him? Did you notice anything?
Yeah, definitely. I think the first time I noticed that was Devil's Thumb. That's the first time I caught back up to Jim before he put the burners on in the high country. I think he had a good gap on me, Hayden, and Dan, who were 2 through 4, by Duncan. And then after Robinson, I think the gap might have gone down a little bit. And then by Dusty, he had to change his shoes, and Hayden and Dan rolled up on him. And I think he was really surprised about that. And those two don't get enough credit. I feel like I get a lot of credit for pushing Jim, because that's what people saw once we left the canyons, but those guys really put the pressure on him, and it was a group effort that got into his mind, maybe like physically wore him down too. And they were definitely the ones putting the pressure on him in the canyons. And I think by the Devil's Thumb climb, Hayden and Dan had taken the lead, and Jim was sitting in a spring to cool off. I passed him there, but he quickly got up and passed me back, and he put a big move up the thumb and had a gap on all of us coming out of there. But I think probably burnt a match doing that. But it was a very collective effort between everyone really in the top 5 that really wore him down.
I think it's interesting. So I was at Duncan too. And Jim definitely felt like he had the day. It was Jim's day. At Duncan, he took his time. At Dusty, he's sitting, changing his shoes, which he did multiple times throughout the day. I mean, at that point, Dan and Hayden passed him. I don't think they stopped at Dusty. I think they just blew by, and they were together. And Jim doesn't even look up. He's just like sitting there, putting his shoes on. And we're all like, whoa, that was the pass, but it was so early. That's mile 38, right? Yeah. And then you came through and we were like, right away. It was like, they're right there. And it was super exciting. I mean, the pack of men, and that carried really throughout the day. I guess the gap started to grow, and then Hayden ended up getting closer. We can get more to that. But I do want to backtrack a bit, because you mentioned that Robinson to Devil's Thumb was actually a low point for you. And I'm curious if you could speak a little bit to that. And also for our listeners, I think it's nice to hear when it seems like you had the best day out there. Like, you can have a low at, you're at mile, after from 30 to 45, something like that. You're having a low in there. How do you get out of that low? And did you ever feel at that time that you kind of started to spiral, or were you just like, okay, I'm in a low, I'm going to be present in this low, and I'm going to get out of this low? Tell us how you worked through that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that was a significant low. It's just a long stretch of descending, and you might think you're running fast, but everyone loves to hammer that section. And I felt like I was losing a ton of time. I felt like I was getting caught by people like Dakota there, and it was a struggle to kind of hold on. And I was glancing down at my watch, and we're running like 640 miles, and I couldn't allow myself to really go faster than that. And when everyone starts to come up from behind you often question if you went out too hard, and if this was the end. A lot of negative thoughts come into your mind, and you think about that storyline of being first up the escarpment and then dying by the middle of the race. But yeah, I think once I saw everyone bunched back together and got back into a climbing rhythm, and could tell I was climbing at a similar pace as Hayden, Dan, and Jim, I think probably the positive feedback came back. I didn't necessarily feel any better, but just when you can stick with that group, it will turn around. You gotta, again, just take it step by step and see how you feel in that moment, and take care of yourself, stick to your plan. I think it's easy to spiral down and stop eating and stop drinking and not focus on your systems, but there's no reason it shouldn't come back if you're doing all the right things. And I mean, it's 100 miles. No one's gonna have zero lows throughout the day. When I passed Hayden for the first time, it was at mile 50 descending into El Dorado, and he looked done. I thought he was going to drop out, truly. He was hobbling down this hill. I heard later someone tell him at Forest Hill his quads were shot, but it comes back. Yeah. So pretty incredible on his part, but I think everyone probably had a moment in that day that was like that. It's just, we were just ripping down some sections, and I can't wait to dive into the splits. But if you're running at that intensity, it's going to come back at some point.
I want to just back up a little bit, and then we'll kind of dive into Tim picking you up and all that part of the race. But you had a couple stabs at golden tickets to get in, and I know that was a fiercely competed spring all around for you guys at Black Canyon and canyons. Tell me just a little bit about your mindset change between Black Canyon and then canyons. Because I know you had to change a few things in order to have the race that you did at Canyons and to really charge the way you did and to sort of seize it. And did that lesson carry over into your approach at States?
Yeah, definitely. I think I learned that done are the days you can sit back and expect to run into a podium or a top 10 or anything like that. I chilled way too hard at Black Canyon. Granted, like I didn't really think I was running that slow, but everyone was running fast, and you just got to do it. You just got to go with them. And fades are just way less likely. I mean, people will fade, but the core group up there, I don't think they'll fade now that everyone knows about nutrition and are taking care of themselves better. So yeah, I that lesson stuck with me. Feeling like I had no shot at Black Canyon, and going into Canyons, I really just wanted to give myself another shot and see if I'm actually, able to run with most of the elite field or not. And if it didn't work out, like that would have been fine. I, probably would have laid down and died and would have been less competitive in the sport. And, just my mentality probably would have changed a little bit on who I wanted to be in the sport. But I wanted a good swing at Canyons, and the way I raced was just like polar opposite as Black Canyon. Granted, I like changed a lot of things. I changed my nutrition and more of like all of those details changed too. But I think at the core of it, my mentality was just like, you got to put yourself up in the front and just kind of hope you fade less than everyone else. Like, I feel like that is more the name of the game now, rather than feeling really strong and pulling away at the end.
See, at the beginning, we said he doesn't make the same mistake twice, and he demonstrated that. Like, wow, I made the same mistake at Black Canes and then Canyons, but I think that's just
a great Black
Canyon.
You did.
But it's awesome to see you implement it in such a short turnaround, because there wasn't much time between those 3 races, but there's a pretty significant improvement in the way you attacked all 3 races.
Yeah. Did you feel like when you were at States and you could feel the pack surging and moving and stuff, that you were just trying to stay locked into that idea of you had to stay with them, or were you still able to pull back and run your own race? Like, how much did you kind of recognize the importance of staying with the pack versus the importance of not getting caught up in the pack?
Yeah, it depends what you call the pack, I guess, because I think Jim is his own pack, and then there's the chase pack behind Jim. I didn't let myself go with Jim early, which I'm happy I didn't do. I think even he probably paid for that a little bit in the high country. I don't know, maybe he didn't, maybe that was his plan. But when Hayden and Dan went by me after Red Star, I decided to go with them, and they were definitely pushing, they were chasing. It felt a little unsustainable, and I was kind of feeling already that I had been climbing a little bit too hard. And but I don't know, I wanted to give it a shot there, and I knew the pace would eventually slow down. So again, I just took it moment by moment and just followed the heels of Hayden and Dan. And then when we got into Duncan, their aid stations were a bit quicker than mine, so they were already out of there. And then I kind of found myself running my own pace in my own race, not trying to chase back up to them, but it turned out they had slowed down a bit too, and we were running a very similar pace getting into Robinson. So,
Right. Can you speak a little bit to the motto that you had all day and how you feel like that motto really played out or mantra, I should say, played out during the day?
Yeah. It was do what's sustainable in the moment. I think that caused me to run harder at times, which allowed us to pull away from the rest of the field. I definitely paid for it at other times, but it's what kept me competitive, and it's also what like allowed me to believe in myself. I think if I had thought that I had 80 miles to go and we were running this hard, I would have slowed down, and I wouldn't have believed that I could do it. I didn't for a second think that we had another 10 hours of racing to go. And that it's amazing what like how far your body can go, right? If like you're not putting that mental barrier on yourself. You don't really have that data point unless you do it and you try. And I think like our default is to tell us, no, we can't do it. And that is way too fast for 100 miles on this terrain. But maybe it is, but like at least go find out if it is first.
I think that's super interesting because the ultra mindset is how we race, right? It's like you're thinking about yourself, at mile 30, you're thinking about how you're going to feel at Forest Hill. You're going to thinking about how you're feeling at the river. You're thinking about your future self, and you just put that aside. Mm-hmm. And that to me is so inspiring, so brave, and just so badass. Like what ballsy like way of racing. And I'm definitely inspired going like, I wonder what that would feel like. It's like you're just running a 5K out there.
Yeah, you're just like sitting in that like moment to moment, right?
Yeah. I mean, in my mind, I didn't have a single thing to lose. Getting 11th last year and blowing up in previous years. In my head, like the only way to really improve from those years was to put myself in the top 5 or the podium. Like I think even if I got 10th, I would have felt probably pretty similar to last year. So I wasn't ever racing to just get M10 and get invited back the next year. I definitely wanted to make like a big mark and a big impact.
Nailed it.
Yeah, you did that. Yeah, mission accomplished, Rod.
But that's like the definition of the flow state is when you're not thinking too far ahead or like behind you, you're in the moment focusing on what you can control.
Yeah.
That is how you can execute like what the body's prepared for. Most people can't get there, but I mean, it's really neat to see that you were able to put yourself in that mindset, because that is where I think the self-actualization is possible.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by Osprey. I see Osprey everywhere, as I'm sure you do too. Whether it's luggage, kids carriers, or running packs, Osprey is the one-stop shop for adventure. My current favorite for backpacking is the Aura LT50 for lighter weight, multi-day overnight trips where comfort and ventilation are critical. It has an anti-gravity suspension that delivers a weight-defying fit that seamlessly envelopes your back and hips. Talk about comfort. The pack also has easy-to-use side pockets, trekking pole attachment, and integrated rain cover. And it's made with recycled materials. Head over to osprey.com and click on their tool, Pack Finder, to find the perfect pack for you.
Tim, you picked Rod up at Forest Hill. What was going through your head as he's kind of like coming through the race? You're probably following along the live stream a bit. You're kind of aware of what's going on, but you're also like that moment of anticipation for like who's going to come through first, what it's going to look like, just like.
So you're at the bottom of bath. So you're the first one that knows.
I didn't go all the way to the bottom of the bath because I was trying to save my legs to make sure I could stay with him. Because I was
fair,
like, dude,
very fair.
The kid's leading the race. Like, I started getting nervous and regretting having like turkey pasta for breakfast with my mom, and I'm like, dude, I thought I was just in for like a fun day on the trails, but this is properly spicy. And so he came in, and right at the top of Bath Road and Forest Hill Road, Jim comes around the corner. He goes by, and then Rod comes in very quickly after him. And first thing was just kind of got the lowdown of like how he was feeling, how he was fueling, any hard spots, just try to get some beta on where he was at mentally. And then as we entered into the Forest Hill station, like, I mean, he spoke to this. He knew what he needed to do, but I just kind of reminded us like, hey, tune everything out. Don't smile. Don't wave to people. Like, it's going to be utter chaos, but you need to get to your crew and focus on the basics. And we go through, and of course it's just mayhem. People are going wild. I feel like it was bigger than it's ever been at Forest Hill this year. And we were 5 seconds behind Jim, like in his wake.
It was a shock. We're all
cheering for Jim, and then it's like, there's Rod, and I threw my phone and just started running. I mean, it was absolute chaos.
And I'm gonna have to pull this up, but some guy just sent me a video of the exchange, because like as we are going down, Rod's crew was right after Jim, and Jim pulls off, and he has the swarm of media, and they just take up the entire road, and I'm yelling, get out of the way. And I'm like stiff arming like media people, because they're just standing in the middle of the road right where Rod's about to run. And this guy sent me the video, so I'm gonna have to like post that, but he's like barreling through. No one expected someone to be on Jim. It hasn't ever happened, but it was utter chaos initially.
It was nuts.
Rod, how did you feel in that moment? Because you probably had never experienced that level of just like energy and chaos, and you're trying to also stay in your game and not get rattled by it. Like, were you able to just lock in, or were you sort of aware of like all this going on?
Yeah, it was nice because I think all the attention was on Jim. I think we were so close behind him that people probably thought we were just like another media person chasing him.
Kind of,
So
yeah.
like I didn't actually feel like a lot of pressure on me, and I felt like I was just like sitting in the slipstream, like going through. Also, I mean, it's a bit different than canyons, but it did feel like running into Forest Hill and canyons in first, and kind of the same like shock reactions. I'm like, I'm still here.
Why am I a dark horse?
Yeah. What's up, doubters?
And then what was actually really interesting, and I thought was kind of fun, both Jim's crew and my crew set up at the very end of Forest Hill Road and before you turn on to Cal Street. So it was cool to have that like that exchange with him there and kind of see the difference in our aid stations. Like I didn't know how he was transitioning before. That was the first time we went into an aid station together, but I kind of had eyes on him while he was doing it, and I was seeing all the things he was doing. And I rushed it a bit. I think we did everything right, but I did rush it a bit because I really wanted to get out of there before him. I think personally for me, I would have been a little intimidated seeing like probably how fast he was running down to Cal 1. So, which he ultimately ran really fast down because he caught up to us not too far down the road. But and I felt like we were running hard down that section. So it was good to be in the front there. And it's kind of when I got my first sense that we were actually going to have a race. And it was hard to tell like between Michigan Bluff and Forest Hill if he was just like playing a game with me and if he just wanted to run as easy as possible to take the win. He let me take the lead at times through that stretch. And so we at least got a nice understanding that we were going to potentially battle in this race by doing things like aid stations quicker.
You know, and what you said earlier about Jim going into Dusty and like sat down, had a mimosa, had a back rub, you know,
Didn't
just
care
chill.
about anybody
What was
else.
noticeable at Forest Hill transition, as Rod was saying, he got in and out quick. Jim was doing his stuff with his crew, but he was constantly looking at us. And I picked up on that as like, okay, he's, you know, at least feeling the feels a little bit that, you know, Rod is here with him. And so I think that was a good move on your part getting out first, because that also put him on the ropes a little bit, mentally a little, just be like, crap, like this kid is actually in
you can play games back.
Yeah.
Let's go. Yeah.
And I keep saying Jim's playing games. Maybe he was never trying to play games, but it's like when Jordan was trying to like make his competitors feel like enemies. Maybe I'm just putting that narrative in my head. Maybe he's actually a really nice dude, but
I think he was probably just so surprised to have someone so close to him, and he's sort of just like, who dat? And also like, like just trying to suss you out and see like, okay, how many matches do you have left, right?
Yeah.
Like, where are you at in your game? And that's like, yeah. So you guys went out together, and you know you're in the lead. Like, how are you kind of pacing that and staying like in the zone so you don't get ahead of yourself?
Yeah, just back to the same thing, just doing what felt right in the moment. I don't know. I felt I've run that stretch so much now, especially this year with canyons, training before canyons, States camp, and now at States. So I kind of remembered just like every step and every hill, and I tried not to get too ahead of myself on the climbs. It was definitely getting warm coming down into there. So yeah, I just tried to cool myself and keep on eating and drinking at the same cadence. But like I guess I wasn't trying to do anything too crazy to pull away maybe. And yeah, nothing really.
All right, Tim, I want to hear your perspective on this because you're with him now. This is the first time that Rod has picked up a pacer from Forest Hill to the river, and you're pacing him. You're excited. Sounds like you're a little nervous, and you're ready to go for it. And you've got your boy, like you're getting this guy to the river as fast as you can. Tell us what was going through your head.
I think the best decision that I didn't even make, Rod made it for me, was he took the lead on the trail. Had I let him out, I probably would have gotten eager and like sent it a little too much. But he, you know, with the confidence that he's been speaking about, like he took the front position. He had a line of sight of the trail and he got to control the pace. And I think, you know, as he kind of spoke to, maybe it felt like a training run where I'm on his shoulder, I'm behind him, but I was amped. I was super pumped. And we were ripping down that section fast. I found myself almost wanting to say like, dude, like this is mile 64. Like, let's slow down a little bit. But like what he was saying, is like, let's run what I can at this moment and then kind of take on the next thing. And so, he was well within his limits, but it was fun just to be ripping, because I've been in that same position with other friends where they've blown up. And anyone that has paced someone that doesn't go well, Cal Street's really painful when you're walking Cal Street. But I mean, honestly, this was just fun. Like, we were ripping down it, and I thought we were actually going to put distance on Jim, so I was surprised when after Cal 1, I heard cheering like 30 to 60 seconds later. I was like, crap, like the king is still there.
Okay, so should we get through? Let's get to the river. Should we walk? Should we get there? All right, we're going to the river. We're at the river.
All the way to the river?
We're going all the way to the river.
Okay. We're missing some good
Are we
stuff.
missing some
No,
stuff?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
what are we missing? No, let's hear it.
There's Cal 2,
Okay,
Cal
let's
3,
go to Cal 2.
There's
There's some
Permanent
passing
Hill.
in there.
We're just gonna stay here all night. All right, let's go. Okay, from Cal 1 to Cal 2, what was most
Okay,
memorable?
I actually
Tim?
want to ask Rod this because we haven't had a chance to talk about it. So
Okay.
we leave Cal 1 and Rod leads out still in front of our little pack, and maybe 30 seconds to a minute later I hear cheering, and so it's like Jim's there, right? And anyone that's run states or that section, there are a couple little really steep grinders on that, and Rod ran most of them, and then he started hiking a little bit, and then it wasn't long before Jim was like on my heel, like literally right behind me.
Can I say something on
Yes.
that? It was on the live stream. So we had a drone shot. Have you heard about this yet?
Yeah.
So there's a drone shot, and it's the raddest thing. Billy Yang, who's right behind us doing this. There's this amazing drone shot. We see, and Debo and Corinne are like, well, there's Jim up. And then Debo's like, I think that's Rod. Oh my God, that's Rod. And it was this like amazing moment, because then, a couple, 30 seconds later, then there's Jim. And it was really interesting because you can see Rod kind of walking some sections, and then you see Jim like flying up those sections. And so that was really interesting. There was this banter, but it was very cool to see on the live stream.
Yeah.
Okay, continue.
And so then it was probably for a good mile, maybe even 2 miles. We had a pack. Rod was leading. I'm right behind Rod, and Jim was right behind me. And I wanted to, did you know Jim was on us that whole time? Or did you think he just caught up to us and passed us when he did make that move?
Definitely not that long. Yeah, I mean, I thought when he passed us, he had just gotten there.
No.
Yeah.
So he was literally sitting on my heel over a mile, could have been 2 miles. And he's, he's coughing and groaning a little bit. And I'm like, this is surreal. Like, I'm in between a sandwich of legends at Western States, fly on the wall, getting to witness history. And because Ron and I went in our training runs, like when we get in the thick of it, we aren't talking. You're just kind of feeling each other's energy. And so we hadn't been talking on Cal Street. It just kind of knew what he needed. He knew what he needed. And so I don't say anything. I wasn't like, hey Rod, there's this guy on our tail. Like, do you want to let him pass?
Did you say anything to me during that stretch?
Nothing. I was just I think I was some
freaking
shell
out.
shocked. I was just sitting there. I was like, oh my God, what do I do?
Feel like do I do a selfie?
Yeah. Pull out my phone. Hey, Jim. Because for me as an athlete, I've always taken that approach of I'm just going to act like I'm feeling really good. Hey, what's up, bud? But they were both just dialed in the zone, and we're going up the climbs together, down the climbs, on the flats. And I'm just like, this isn't happening. This is wild. And then, so I was wondering if you even knew that Jim was there, but
No idea.
he was basically just on our tail drafting for a while. And then we finally hit a little climb, and Rod started hiking it out. And that's where Jim made the pass around us. And he kind of looked around, and I knew he was going to make that kind of, like most people on single track, they make a decisive move where if you get a 10, 15 second gap, it can break the elastic mentally because there's so many curves, you won't see him. And that's kind of what he did. He gapped us, but turns out it wasn't that far of a gap.
Yeah. And I think generally the theme of the day was Jim was stronger than on the climbs, and he was able to pull away in those. I think every pass he made was probably on a climb. And yeah, I struggled to decide if I should push it a little bit. I also didn't want to personally sound like I was working too hard, and he could hear that. So I wanted to just play it as easy and cool as I can. But yeah, when he made that pass, it was in between Cal 1. We're probably a mile and a half away from Cal 2. Mm-hmm. And then we finally heard the Cal 2 aid station, and he had like put in a lot of time. I think it was a couple minutes, definitely.
Yeah, when we left Cal 2, we sponged you down. The aid station volunteer said 2 minutes is what they told us.
Yeah.
But what makes the next section, Cal 2 to 3, really impressive for what Rod did.
Can I ask you a quick question? What happens when he passes? I mean, does he acknowledge you? Does he say anything to you? Is there a good job? I mean, we did hear, and you could speak a little bit to this, but previously he had told you to dunk yourself in the water. Like there was some interaction earlier on in the day, but now we're getting to the real spice of the day. And this is like hot and heavy. We are
like
we are
off.
racing. Yeah. So what was the?
So I remember this one. Let's see what Rod says.
Let's see what he said.
We'll test his memory.
I think when he made that pass specifically, he was like, "Good job, Rod." I think, unless
okay. So Rod's 66 miles, 67 miles deep, and he's starting to get a little loopy. Jim goes on the outside wide, and Rod says, "Good job, Jim." And Jim may have said something back. Like Jim's like he's very respectful and like a great dude. I didn't hear it because he was a friend of me, but Rod definitely said, "Good job, Jim."
Maybe he's just like talking to himself, right?
Yeah.
I really needed to hear that from myself.
He's like secretly saying, "Good job, Rod. Good job, Rod."
Earlier in our exchanges, and I counted the lead switches. Basically, once we started doing that after Michigan Bluff, and I think there were 10 total between us, so the lead changed 10 times. And I feel like that stretch to Forest Hill, through Volcano and stuff like that, we were. He said a couple encouraging things. He was like, "You're running really well," and he told me to dunk in that stretch. I did face plant going down the Volcano descent. He didn't say a word. And he was right behind me.
Just kind of stepped over.
No, he waited for me to get up, but he didn't say a word. And then I asked him, as we started climbing up, I asked him if he wanted to take it, and he was like, "No, you're running really well." And then I asked him if how does our pace compare to his course record year? Oh. And I think he said he was like 8:20 or 8:30 to Forest Hill that year. And we were like 8:40, I think, or 8:50 or something like that. So we were still way off that time. But I guess we really ran a lot harder from Forest Hill to the finish compared to that year for him. That's kind of off topic, but yeah.
That is interesting. Did you feel like that beta kind of changed anything about your day, or was that just kind of like interesting information for you?
Yeah, I think it did, because I started to think about time all of a sudden. I hadn't thought about time all day. Like, we were getting splits and obviously looking at our watch, but I didn't actually look and in my head, I thought I was going to run 15:30 that day, like when I was like visualizing for this race. And
wow,
I figured like we were on pace for that. Maybe it felt
66 minutes off of that. Incredible.
But I hadn't really thought about it. And then I started to think like, okay, we were running like 8:45 to 8:50 to Forest Hill. That's like 100K in 8:45 with 11,000 feet. That's like Canyon's 100K, which is like the time I ran at Canyon's 100K. So a lot was going through my head of like, like we're either going to have like a historically fast day, or I'm just going to blow up super hard here. So yeah, I finally started to think about the time, and I remember we hit Cal 2 together, and I was like, if we run like a 5-hour 50K, we're going to go still sub 15, which is pretty cool. Yeah. So,
yeah, definitely.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Okay, and I know there was like an interesting past moment where you retook the lead, and Jim didn't even know it, right? And that was right before Rucky Chucky. And that was just like kind of a fun one, I feel like, because you just had this chance to kind of get back in it. Like, tell us that little story.
I'll let Tim tell that one.
So Rod blacked out at this point.
Yeah.
Tim's taking over the interview.
So we got into Cal 3, which is 5 miles from the river. And the aid station volunteer, like Rod was in the zone, got soaked, sponged down. And the aid station volunteer like came up, like looked deep in my eyes and just like whispered 30 seconds. And I was just like, oh my God. Like, because at Cal 2 there was a 2-minute gap, and so Rod was flying down those switchbacks going into or coming out of Cal 2, but we leave, and it wasn't long after there were more steep climbs that are exposed. It gets pretty warm. Rod was running all of them, and then we got down to, it's called Sandy Bottom. We're running down through kind of like the thick of it, some rocky areas, and then I said, Rod, do you see that? And he goes, yep. And it was just this like bouncing bucket hat, like right in front of us. And it's like, oh my God, we're back, you know? Because I kind of had the same sentiment that Rod did, that when he made that move back before Cal 2, like maybe that's the last time we see Jim. You don't know, like this is his bread and butter. But we were getting closer, like 15 seconds back, 10 seconds back, 5 seconds back. And I was starting to think of like things to tell Rod, be like, you know, say something to Jim as we pass, to like throw a dagger in the, you know, in him as like just a mental blow. But
like, good job, Jim.
like, oh, you're looking great, buddy. But right as we're about to pass,
effort. Bye. Yeah.
Out of nowhere, he just like beelines to the left, down through shrubs into the river. It's not a place that people normally soak. And we go by, and that's where Rod said, what the heck? Like,
I'm
where'd he go?
I'm
Jim
trying to
playing
imagine where that is.
Is Jim playing head games? Is what you asked me, and I think that's where that first thing came out. Like, you know, that narrative maybe came up like at Rucky Chucky and later, like in the live stream. It was like, oh, is Jim playing head games? But Rod had asked because I think he was genuinely confused. Like, why did Jim just leave the course?
Like dove off the trail into the bushes.
And I was like, no, he's hot. He's overheat. Like he's on the ropes a bit, you know. But in that moment, I said, this doesn't change anything. Focus on the basics, stay calm, get to the river, find your next pacer, Chris. And like, we're 23 miles out. Like nothing matters right now.
Oh my God.
Okay. How far are you from the river at this point?
That was basically right before you get back onto the big fire access, like the surface road. So you're probably, I'd say we were 2 miles from the river, mile and a half to 2 miles.
I feel like we're gonna start thinking about that next time I'm on the trail. Like, was this where it was? Because I feel like there's no access to the river.
So Jim said to me after the race that that's his secret spot.
Okay.
And he thought he had enough of a lead. He could sneak down and get a little cool. And like, so he was confident that he had broken
secret
Rod.
spot revealed.
Now you know, Rod.
I know, yeah.
You know not to take that.
Yeah. It's kind of like
God.
Jim's wrong turn. You know.
I'm gonna go clear the trail there and put a sign that said Walmsley's hole. This way.
Oh my God.
But then, like, I know we ran almost every step to Rucky Chucky, like, which is fully exposed. It's hot by this point. Mm-hmm. But this is where I did watch the live stream back, and the drone picked up Jim, or they picked up the two of us, and they thought it was Jim and a pacer or someone. And then they finally realized, wait, no, like Rod's leading the race. Because Cal 3 split showed Jim first. Yeah. No one knew Rod had taken the lead until that open area. And then when we entered Rucky Chucky, that's where kind of pandemonium broke loose, especially for Jim. He showed up not knowing he was in second.
Which is wild. And I was in the river, so we're all sitting there expecting Jim, and then all of a sudden, like, Rod comes around the corner, and then like Jim forgot his bottle in Rucky Chucky because he was so like rattled, I think, trying to chase you. Like, it was just all of a sudden, it was like all hell breaking loose in there.
Was he planning on taking crew at Rucky Chucky, or was this planned Green Gate?
I don't believe so. I think he had a pacer set up for Pointed Rocks, which he did pick up.
Okay.
But I believe he was planning on going maybe even the whole way solo.
Okay, yeah. But how about like doing like a sit down switch with his crew?
The crew?
Yeah.
It must have been Green Gate because they were ready at Green Gate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, so let's talk about it. So you get to the river at first. Hilary says it's absolute pandemonium. What else? What is going through your mind? You just passed him. Jim doesn't know. Do you know that Jim doesn't know?
No, I also didn't know Jim was right there in the aid station. I actually thought we had a little bit of a gap, and I got into the river, and then like people were yelling at me in the river that Jim's in the river with you.
Yeah, you guys are both swimming at the same time.
There's an anaconda in the river. Get out!
I was annoyed, honestly. I'm like, come on. I thought like this is gonna be at least a little bit of a break, and I could run up Green Gate my own pace. And then I was like tripping in the river, trying to, you know, just get through it quickly. I didn't want him like on my neck. But yeah, got out of the river. And
Were you trying to cool in the river? Like, I know Jim like swam the whole thing. Were you also
Yeah.
trying? And he put the PFD on. I don't know if that's like
yeah,
an interesting move, but
his move looked smart. It definitely seemed easier to float in it rather than like try to navigate all the rocks, and he was definitely cooling by doing that. Yeah, pro move.
he was the only one of the top guys that did
Yeah.
that, and we were all like, interesting.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, like, were you kind of overheating in that moment? Were you trying to be like, I need to cool down, or you looked so comfortable every time I saw you?
I didn't really feel overheated at all during the day, but I wanted to use the river to as much as I could and dunk a couple times, but I was also just trying to be pretty quick. I could have spent more time in it, I think. But yeah, I was hoping to get up the Green Gate climb at least like one bend so he couldn't see me before getting there. So I could tell he was taking his time, and like he went off trail to go jump in a river. He's going to use the river to cool off quite a bit. So I thought we could get some sort of gap, but yeah, I think he was like right up on us after a minute of climbing on Green Gate, and he had some friends come down from Green Gate and help pace him up. There's a film crew there, and it was just like this big pack of like 10 people on the Green Gate Trail, just all running up together side by side. My pacer, Chris Brown, behind me, and he has some cool clips from it, just like showing us side by side running up it. And it's so tense. Like, no, it's so quiet. Like, there's a lot of people, but so quiet, and no one's saying a word. And Chris had the insight and I guess experience to know that Jim was probably going to sit at Green Gate for a bit and take his crew because he missed the crew on the other side. So we were going to use that to our advantage, and I got one dump of water on my head going to the Green Gate and ran out where Jim sat. But apparently he took a split there, and he was waiting, or he sat for about 2.5 minutes before finally getting up and chasing me. And then this is kind of the end of the fun battle, unfortunately. But in between Green Gate and ALT, probably mile 83 or 84, he finally ran up to us. So I guess he literally ran a minute per mile faster than me to make that move. And I kind of figured he would chill for a little bit and sit behind us, but he just went for it and made the pass. And it's up this kind of switchbacky climb. It's like the one major climb in between those two aid stations. Not too steep, like totally runnable, but I was shuffling up it, and he saw that, I'm sure, and just put in this power move around me. And yeah, I didn't even try to go. And yeah, that's when I think back in the race, I keep coming to that moment, and I question if I just like maybe hung on for 15 seconds or 20 seconds, it would have maybe gotten in his head that I am strong in the end here, and he might have chilled out a bit, and we might have had a little bit better of a race. But at the end of the day, he was climbing way stronger than me, and I was suffering up the last two climbs, like up to Point of Rocks into Roby. So I'm sure even if I hung on that long, he probably would have snapped the elastic there. So yeah, overall, just like that experience made me realize why this guy is who he is. Like, he can just do that at the end of a race, and he just knows how to race and knows where to make those moves and can see how people are feeling. Granted, I think he probably had some low moments throughout the chase, but yeah, I mean, he held it together, and he had a mission on the day and knew what he had to do. So yeah.
So that begs the question, you said at the beginning, you really break things down, take a analytical, objective approach, and you were surgical through aid stations, much the way you described Dan and Hayden. Do you think at Green Gate, had you taken an extra minute there, would it have made any difference? Or were you so smooth on those transitions, it wouldn't impact you? Because Jim was like Wolverine. If he sat down, his powers just got stronger. And then he'd stand up, and like you said, he put a minute per mile over those 5 miles. Like, do you think your best strategy is to have that small transition, or later in the race, if you'd taken a little more, do you think you could have had a little more to stay 15 seconds with him as you described?
Hard to say. What I know for a fact is the only reason we had a race that close that late is because I was out of the aid stations quick. Mm-hmm. He's the best runner in the field. Like I will fully acknowledge that, and I think everyone will. He's running. His like overall moving pace is so much faster than everyone. The only reason it was close is because we were quick through the aid stations, and I think he will even say that. So I don't know. Maybe I would have recharged, but would I have recharged as much as Jim? Would I have been able to run as fast as Jim? I don't really know. I do know I made some changes later in the race nutritionally that probably left me a little bit more depleted towards the end had I stuck to what I wanted to do for my plan.
Why did you do those? Why did you make that change?
A little bit of GI, and I was basically getting most of my carbs through gel. Up until mile 70, I was getting my carbs through gel and drink mix. And then it was just getting a little bit tough to drink my drink mix in my bottles, and I didn't want to stop hydrating at the rate I was. So I made the option to switch to just water and gel. So I effectively went from 100 grams of carbs an hour to 60 grams in the last 50K, which is like a pretty big deficit, I think, especially like that late in a race when your glycogen is depleted. I also didn't opt for much caffeine. So maybe if I had done more caffeine in that last stretch from the river to the finish, maybe I would have had a little bit of fight. I think like I made the right moves for myself in the moment, but I should, moving forward, have a plan. If that goes south, I need to have a plan to still supplement those carbs. And I don't know, maybe I could have done 3 gels in an hour instead of 2 gels to be back up to 90, because the gels were going down easy. But yeah, your faculties aren't running that quickly, and you're not thinking really that quickly that late into the race, especially when you're racing and you have someone on you. You can't, like, the only thing I was thinking about is like, where's Jim and where am I relative to the race? And then later is like, where's Hayden?
Right.
And, yeah. So I don't know. It's easy to sit down and think in retrospect, but I think that's the important part to do that I need to keep doing. And I think everyone needs to do is to really reflect on, even if you had the best day of your life, like, it could be better. So
I know, Tim, you saw Rod at Pointed Rocks, but you were being paced by Chris then, right? And so skipping ahead a little bit to some of the stuff with Hayden at the end, because that's just like so much fun and crazy how that played out so unexpectedly. Yeah. You thought you had a pretty, a reasonable lead on Hayden, right? Through the Pointed Rocks to Roby Point section. Mm-hmm.
Like 5 minutes.
Yeah, reasonable in the course of
Okay.
a race that's insanely close, where you guys are like seconds apart. Did you feel at that point you were just kind of surviving and trying to like get to the finish? Like, do you feel at all that your focus changed once Jim had a bit of a gap on you? Like, was there kind of a moment in there?
Yeah. Definitely. When it wasn't a battle anymore, the focus definitely changed. And, I was hurting climbing. I was really just trying to run up these climbs and try not to walk as much as possible. Just knowing I was bleeding time. And I knew Hayden was keeping up. Chris was giving me updates, and he was getting updates. We had 10 minutes at Green Gate, and every aid station I was getting a little bit smaller, but 10 minutes at Green Gate means he has to run 30 seconds per mile faster to catch me by the end. And we were still moving. Like, I think the split is still a really fast split from the river to the finish. It's not like we blew up or anything like that, but we were definitely slowing down, and Hayden was speeding up. So by the time we got to Pointed Rocks, it had cut down to 5 minutes. And then in my head, I was like, or 6 minutes. In my head, I'm like, that's a minute per mile. He has to run faster. I was like, okay, it's kind of cutting it close, but still, this is mostly a downhill stretch until Roby. And I don't think he's going to put a minute per, like, what is he going to run, like 6 minute pace down this hill? So I was like still a little bit fine. And I was like, coming to terms with the fact that I was going to get second on the day. And we got down to No Hands Bridge where I saw Tim and Esther Kendall. And Esther was yelling back that I had to go. They were on me, and Tim was also yelling. He didn't. I don't think he said that, but I think he was like starting to get nervous too, especially because I don't think we were looking too hot.
You guys looked like you were 97 miles deep into a hard-fought battle.
Yeah. So we ran well, I think, up to Roby. I mean, I barely walked the Roby climb, and then I didn't think we were in trouble. Is essentially what it came down to, and I didn't think there was any chance Hayden was going to catch us until I'll let Tim tell this part. So,
yeah, Tim, what was your experience at Roby?
Oh man, so it was wild because I saw them at No Hands and they did not look well, and so I thought we should rush up to Roby. So I hop in the car, like hammer up there, sprint down to Roby. I'm waiting, and Chris and Rod come in together at Roby Point. It's just over a mile out. It's probably like 1.3.
1.3, yeah.
Chris is Rod's pacer.
Chris Brown, Rod's pacer. And, bless Chris's heart. And this is something that happens, when you're pacing someone, you forget to take care of yourself. And he was taking such good care of Rod.
Yep.
He didn't basically take in anything for hours, and he had finally paid the price, and he cracked. Like he said shortly after he handed Rod off to me, because that was not the plan. I wasn't going to take Rod from Roby to the finish, but like I think Chris like collapsed, cramped, threw up, ended up in the med tent. So
you broke your pacer, Rod.
Rod completely broke his pacer. But
I had no idea either. Like he was yelling at me up Roby. Like it felt like he was fine, And when he said Tim's going to take you from here, I thought that was just going to be like, for Tim and my bond, but
the fun lap from Roby.
He was like, "Thank God! Like I can't go another step.
Yeah.
Save me, save yourself, Rod."
You're just like, "Okay, cool, okay, bye."
Yeah. And so but Chris didn't say anything to us about how close Hayden was, and so I had assumed also like, "Hey, we're all right." Like I kind of looked down the dirt road behind us and couldn't see anything. And we ran most of that climb, and it's steep. It's properly steep on the
Hayden
pavement.
had his headlamp off. Oh no, there was no headlamp. Duh.
No.
Are
Yeah.
you kidding?
They're too fast for that.
Headlamp. What am I thinking? I'm thinking myself in those moments.
And so we're going up Roby, and I'm impressed. Rod's running, and then has to walk a little bit, then run, then walk. And I don't know if you remember, but there's this guy.
I remember.
Okay, we're gonna keep that. We won't say that one right now. But one of the best moments of the whole day.
Say it. We wanna hear it.
Fans are gonna have to find us later. Hit up Rod, follow him on social. Maybe he'll tease it out. So we get to the top, we crest Roby, and then you have basically 1 mile to the track. And we got into a little groove, we're running, and that's where I started looking at my watch, and I said to Rod, "Do you want to break Hazen's record?" Because I knew we could run faster, we were on pace, but we'd have to pick it up or at least maintain. And Rod responded, "No, I just want to finish." And in my mind, I was like, mad respect. Like, you just ran an incredible day. Let's enjoy this final mile. You don't get this very often. And he was starting to almost like kind of lose. Like, you can look into someone's eyes, and their eyes are kind of like,
they're not quite there.
They're kind of like there's darkness in there.
A ghost of themselves.
And he was kind of at that state. But I was like, hey, let's just get through. We start going up the final little climb before the 2 left turns onto the White Bridge. And there's this big block party that's always out there. I rile him up. I'm like, come on, cheer this guy on. And I just so happened, first time of the entire day, I looked over my shoulder. I looked over my shoulder right before the turn, and there's literally this like sea of white that just took up the entire road. And I was like,
oh my God,
this is Hayden and his posse. And I turned around and said, I don't care what you want. You have to go. And I think he's like, what? And we like sprint across the White Bridge. Then there's the left turn down in, like, you have to go about a half mile into the track. We are literally sprinting. Like, I was afraid Rod's turnover wouldn't keep up with his heart.
Like
and
the
he would just
Roadrunner,
like
right?
fall and just like face plant. And we were going, I think, right around 5-minute pace, maybe a touch under 5-minute pace for that section. And we enter the track, and people apparently thought it was Hayden, so they're going crazy. And then they're like, "This is Rod." And we got to the 200 mark, turn around, and Hayden's on the track behind us. And I just keep screaming at Rod. Like, I don't know if he could hear because everyone was screaming, but it was like, he was just all gas. And then, I mean, do you remember anything in the final 200?
I mean, it's all a blur. Like, I remember making the turn and hitting the track, and I couldn't tell what was happening. Like, I think my eyes were crossed or something, and everything's like rushing by you. I could feel people on my shoulder. I didn't know who they were. I was very scared that was Hayden on my shoulder, and I was like, I better get second, man. Like, I put in too much work to get here to get third. I really wanted second there, and I never thought it would turn into a sprint finish. Like, it was truly my nightmare. When Jim went by me, I was like, at least we don't have to sprint.
Right? The end of a 100-mile race, the last thing you want to do.
Yeah. So yeah, I was very disappointed when Tim was like, we gotta go.
You're like, do we?
Imagine if Tim wasn't there.
No, totally. Yeah, I think about that a lot too. And if Chris, bless his soul, had to get
oh man, he
like,
was probably
get heli back out
yeah,
there.
exactly. And I had to do that solo.
Imagine being Chris.
Yeah. He's on the sidewalk looking up in his own puke, and he sees Hayden run by. He's trying to scream, but no one hears him.
Yeah. I'm glad I had someone there.
I want to see your data for that section. Did your heart rate just spike like through like 210, just like?
I probably, honestly, yeah, because when I was passed out on the ground, that's kind of the last thing I actually remember. But I just remember breathing so hard and
after you've crossed the finish line. For our listeners,
you just
to
threw
make sure
yourself. I feel like
Yeah.
you kind of just launched at the finish line. It was kind of amazing. You were like, there was nothing more you could give coming down that stretch. You were
like
just
a true track finish where you have to kind of stick your chest out. Like,
it was, from our perspective, it was pretty cool to see, Rod. Like, there was no looking around or anything. Like, you were just running as hard as you could, and that was all you could do in that moment. And it was just like, I just hope it's enough, right? Like, that's all I got,
Exactly.
And then you hit the ground, and we were all worried. We were like, "Oh, is he okay? This is so good."
Yeah, it went from excitement to
total silence.
John, get on over here.
The funny thing too is I didn't actually feel nauseous at all until I hit the ground, and then it just started vomiting.
Sounds like you didn't feel anything.
Yeah, that's
you
true.
were just floating. Yeah.
Oh my god.
Absolute mayhem. So you were at the finish line.
Yeah, I was sitting on the other side of the line, and from our perspective, you coming into the track, it's Hayden, it's Rod, no, it's Hayden. Like, people didn't know what was going on, and it wasn't until you actually rounded the corner and came down the final chute that we're like, it's Rod. And then, when you hit the ground and just kind of wheezed and then just rolled over and puked, it was just so impressive because you could just tell you gave it all. And it honestly, it still gives me kind of chills thinking about it now because you executed an amazing race from start to finish and you put it all out there in a way that was really, the word inspiring is overused, but underrated. It really was inspiring. You just were brave all day with what you thought was possible for you, beyond what you thought was possible for you. If we're talking times and you thought you were going to be 15:30 and you were 14:24, holy shit, Rod, brave beyond even what you thought was possible. And that's just incredible that you did that.
Yeah.
I think there's a little bit of now going forward for the people that watched what happened thinking, what would Rod do in this situation? Right. And that idea of that self-belief. And I think there was that thread that carried throughout the entire day. And yeah, you put yourself out there like no one ever has to Jim Walmsley. And it really was a day to remember. I mean, you are the hardest worker I've ever seen. And being able to watch you as a friend, being able to throw down that time, the third fastest time in history, is absolutely we're all just so proud and just viscerally excited for you in such big ways. I think it's interesting. I think we should circle back a little bit to your first comment when we sat down and you were like, I don't know if it was a dream realized. It almost feels as if there's something left or there's a fire in you that you're like, what else could happen at Western States? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's no beating around the bush with with that since I got second. I mean, I want to win the race. Yeah, I, even before something like this, I think everyone one day who is obsessed with the race dreams of themselves winning the race, and it's what keeps you motivated 365 days of the year. Like, this race is ultra running to me. It's what got me into the sport. It's what's kept me driven in the sport. And I don't know if I'll win the race one day. Like, not that I think that was a fluke. I just think that everyone was capable of doing what I did, and maybe they now realize that they can do that, and it's gonna be just as close of a race every single year now, and probably even closer as more people come into the sport. But yeah, I mean, I proved to myself that I could. When I think back, and I wonder if that was a dream realized or not. I think what I think about more is that I don't feel like I did everything correctly on the day, and I think my dream is to do everything correctly on the day and be able to respond to a move like Jim. Like, whether I beat him on that day or not, it's hard to say, but I want to put myself in that position to be able to have that chance. And while I did my best for 85 miles, I don't think there's that extra like 14 miles that I could have been better. And I think my dream is to have that race where I'm right there at mile 99 and I did every possible thing correctly to get myself there. And then whether that's first, second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever that year brings me, I just want to have that experience.
That's so interesting. And I think taking away the like outcome and focusing more on just like your outcome is like a really, to me, seems like a healthy way to approach it, because you can never control what the rest of the field is doing out there. And if you just measure that as your success, then that's always going to be hard.
Yeah.
I mean, so before this, we actually looked at your past Western States results, and it is just incredible to see like the difference in your personal races and how far you've come. Like 2021 DNF, right? 2022, you were 22:48. 2023, you were 16:15. Yeah, repping the 22:48. So, and then 2024, 14:24. So like, just thinking about how much time you took off from last year, you took off almost 2 hours. Even more inspiring that you're not just kind of someone that's come out of nowhere and had this like kind of amazing race, but who knows where it'll go. But you've really chipped away at not just your times, but like who you are and like where you want to be. And it was interesting hearing you talk about canyons and like how you would have felt if you hadn't won that race. And just like these little moments in life, these little pivotal things, right? Where it's like, if it had gone one way, what would that have looked like? And
Tim not seeing Hayden.
Tim not seeing, yeah.
What would have happened?
All these little micro things, but it's just kind of crazy to step back from it all and just be like, at the end of the day, the biggest thing that changed was you. Like, Rod believed in Rod, and like, I just think that's a really powerful thing that like any of us can take and apply, because that's like a tangible, like, I can change that. I can have a better narrative in my head when I'm out there. Like, that's just something that we're all capable of. And I've certainly dug some great holes, and like, like it's far easier to go down that route than it is to really believe what's possible. Yeah. And I think that your times speak to that. And then just like, the progression is insane.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I agree. It's been a great progression, and self-belief was at the core of it. And part of it was just like, I just need to give myself the chance to really know if this is possible or not. And that's what I feel like I came into this season with. I mean, after Black Canyon, I just wanted to really understand if I could be at this level or not. And there's been a lot in my career up to now of just like being on the edge and being on the verge and being like, maybe I just started the sport a little too late and the sport's just growing faster than I am. And it's easy to fall into that hole, and there's so many ways that you can convince yourself that is the truth. But at the end of the day, you have to give yourself all the data to make that accurate. And that's what I wanted to do this year. And I think no, I wouldn't have been as happy if I didn't get second and it went that way. But I think I would have been at least a little bit more at peace with maybe not being elite if, I tried my best and I gave myself those data points and it just still wasn't working out.
What's beautiful about what you just described is, and jumping off of Hilary, is that notion of when you change the way you see things, the things you start to see change. And you started believing yourself more that, hey, I do belong here. I can be at the front of the race. And like everything you started to see change because you changed the framing of it. And I think that's just a great thing. Like you said, we can all take something from it where we can reframe what we're working on and look in the minutia and overturn the next rock. And for all those data geeks out there, remember, Rod said in the final 50K, he went from 100 grams of carbs per hour to 60. That was a 40% drop over the last 5 hours. Maybe it wasn't 5 hours, 4 hours or so, 4.5 hours. Like, there's time left on the table there. But I think it's cool that, and I admire that you, having had just a day, which was an incredible day, still recognize that, you can appreciate that day, but everything in life is imperfect, and there's always something we can keep iterating on, and that's what makes it fun. There's still a puzzle out there to work on, and from hearing you talk, it's you're not done with this puzzle. And I think we're all just super psyched to see that this 28-year-old has a desire and a fire to figure out the puzzle of Western States after running 14:24. So I think it's pretty sweet.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. That's a great way to wrap it up. Yeah.
Oh man, Rod, we are so excited for you. Thank you so much for just sitting down and chatting it all through. I know you haven't had time to process it yourself, so we really appreciate that you're willing to dissect it with us. Yeah.
Yeah. This is all helping me process it. So thanks for giving me the opportunity.
It's so cool, hearing you and Tim just kind of walking through some of the days, Tim's experience of it versus your experience when you're in the middle of it. Yeah. So thank you both for your time, and just honestly, we can't wait to see what comes next. I think if anything, it's more watch out world, here comes Rod, because you're not the dark horse anymore, which I think that's kind of cool, because I feel like just seeing you battle Jim and seeing how comfortable you were in that kind of stressful zone, I have full confidence that you're going to be able to still run your own race and not be swayed by that. So
thank you.
Super excited to see what you do next.
I hope so. It's fun being the dark horse, so.
Yeah.
You are no longer.
I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah. Well, thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks so much, Tim. No way would I have done that without you, truly. So
Dream Team, the Mammoth Dream Team, you guys.
Yeah. Let's run it back.
Huge thank you to Rod for coming on the pod less than a week after his race. And thank you to Tim for adding your color on the day. What'd you guys think about this podcast? Give us a like, share it with your friends. We want to hear what you think. What a race for the history books. Give Rod a follow on Instagram if you haven't already. He will never be the dark horse again. And I can't wait to see what's next for him. Till next time, trail people.